You're listening to Uproar, a podcast of the Akron Zoo that gives listeners a behind-the-scenes look at the zoo, our amazing animals, and the dedicated people who work here. With your Uproar hosts, Zach Berkey, Randy Thomas, Sam James, and Elena Bell. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Uproar.
All right, welcome Uproar fans. I am thrilled to introduce the Akron Zoo's Horticulture Manager, Julie. Julie's been with the Akron Zoo for, I think, about 10 months, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
December 18th.
There we go. Before joining and enjoying the zoo, Julie worked as a horticulturist and a crew leader at Davy Tree.
Correct.
So, hello, Julie, and welcome to Uproar.
Thank you for having me.
Is this your first podcast?
Yes, ever.
Awesome.
I've never even listened to one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
All right, Julie, so why don't you kind of talk us through how you became a horticulturalist, how did you get into the industry, and kind of walk us through your experience so far at the Akron Zoo being a horticulture manager.
So history-wise, when I was younger, my grandfather was, he worked on the railroad, but had a traumatic brain injury, and so then he was pretty much retired. And in the backyard was gardens galore. His father was a farmer. And I just really enjoyed being out there. So then we always had small gardens at home. But then I found as I got older, I was not any happier than when I was outside in 90-degree weather planting. I consider it my art. So if I've done somebody's yard and somebody visits, you can tell in a private allotment where Julie's been. So I went back to school for it, and I love it. My experience here, I joke around, I want to feed the tigers, and I want to die here. I don't ever want to have to look for another job. Every day is different. I have tons of different things to do. I'm not just tied to one department. There's a lot of conversations with conservation, conversations with special events, things that need overhauled, succession planting. There's always just something that we can make an impact with.
You know, I'm just going to go there. We're a zoo. We're focused on animals. Why do the plants matter?
So the plants matter for several reasons. We actually do use a lot of our collection for browse, meaning that in the aviary examples, or even with the lions, if we're taking down a tree, some of those branches are then cut and placed into the habitats for perching, giant kitty scratching posts. The bears use them as play toys. But then likewise, we have some things that we cut and they take in and give them to the, I think they're the leaf cutter ants, I think is what they are, and they just munch away. So we do use it as a food source or a supplemental food source with our bamboo on grounds. It also benefits the canopy. So we are providing shade over a lot of the areas, so they're not always in direct light. It's beneficial too, because when we have these big rains, if we had no canopy, we had no trees, everything would hit that ground and it would run off. So then it's going to overload our storm system. Up by Lions would be okay, but as it washes down, it would definitely flood Carousel and Komodo Kingdom.
You mentioned bamboo. We have a lot of bamboo planted throughout the park. Should our listeners plant bamboo in their yards?
So that's a loaded question. I'm going to be blatantly honest and say that I hate it. But I hate it only from the standpoint that what we've planted is cultivars that run, which means as it continues to spread, it's not going to stop at your sidewalk or stop at your asphalt. It's actually going to send roots under and through it, so you'll get a lot of buckling. There are cultivars of bamboo out there that are clump form. So think of a clump of grass. You're going to plant that and it's going to stay in that little 2 foot by 2 foot section and it won't take over the yard. If you put in some of the cultivars we have, you're not going to have a backyard.
So part of your job is obviously making the park look really aesthetically pleasing. And some of it is probably more on the conservation side of it. So
Correct.
What is the kind of ratio between keeping the park looking pretty and the conservation aspect of it?
So keeping the park look pretty is always 100% goal, and it's, I'm going to say, an unrealistic goal because we have so much space and you can't always stay on top of that. From a conservation standpoint, as we move forward, my goal is to take some of these areas that we would put annuals in, and even though they may be native, remove them and put in native to Ohio, native to Midwest areas to try and alleviate some of our costs on the annuals, but provide things that are better for our area. It also turns into a learning experience because people see them and they question. Moving forward, as we're taking out some of these trees that are bad, it's the same thing. Our parking lot was a great example. They put maple in there, which is native to this area. However, they put all the same maple in there, which means it's a monoculture. When one gets sick, then they pretty much all get sick. So one of our projects is we're currently working on I'm going to say a 3-year renovation, removing all of these diseased maple, but in the process of putting new things in, we're not doing it where, okay, we're going to put exactly 2 trees in that same bed. We may put 1 tree, that tree may be bigger, but 90%, 95% of them are going to be native to this area, so they'd be bigger, hardier for our area. There would be some non-native, only because of the pollinators and the songbirds. Some of our native stuff may not necessarily give them everything they need. So when we have a dogwood, we could have a Chinese dogwood that's not native, but it's still going to provide habitat and a food source for pollinators, for songbirds. We can still use our native dogwood as well, but we don't want all the same tree out in the parking lot.
Why is planting native plants important?
They're tried and true. A lot of times, and the other thing I need to make sure I clarify is native versus non-native versus invasive. So just because it's native doesn't mean it's not invasive. So the goal is to make non-invasive, keeping it native because they're used to our climates. If you bring a maple up that's, okay, it's a maple, but say it's more native to the south into this range, it's not going to make it. You put a sugar maple in up here, it's going to make it, it's going to thrive. Same thing with the coneflowers. So we're really supporting a lot of our native wildlife up here. And in some cases, it actually does help to repopulate species. They did some plantings up in Detroit, and they actually found that they were bringing back butterflies that were endangered.
So speaking of butterflies, I know the Akron Zoo has a monarch station. Are there any things that you can kind of tell our audience of things that they can do in their own backyard, things that you would recommend, in their own garden that, we also kind of promote and have on display here at the Akron Zoo?
Absolutely. One of my favorite plants is coneflowers. There's so many different colors. There's so many different varieties. So you may look at it and think, okay, all we have is purple and red. You'll have some that are bigger blooms. You'll have smaller blooms. You'll have different seasons of blooms. But because they are so hardy, it's an all-year win. So if you plant them, you get them in the ground, they're going to establish themselves. They'll be feeding you'll have some birds in the summertime, but you'll have butterflies in there as well. But then when you get into winter and those plants have died back for the season, they're still feeding songbirds. We're also making great strides to add in milkweed, which was great because I actually was out picking at plants the one evening, and we had monarch caterpillars on the milkweed at our front gate, and that was a new install. So to see that we put these plants in, and I want to say end of May, beginning of June, and then a month ago we're having caterpillars. So we're making an impact. So if we can do that, even if you have a small bed at home that's running along the front of your house, 10 foot by 3 foot, add milkweed into it, add asters, add those food sources for seasonal food, especially for the bees.
I want to circle back real quick to the parking lot project you were talking about. I do want to shout out you and your team for the amount of work you guys have done to the whole front part of the zoo.
Thank you.
I don't know how many of our listeners are going to be at the zoo or have come to the zoo, but you will notice that there is a lot of new plants and new trees and everything that have been planted at the front, towards the front of the zoo, and I do want to shout out you.
Thank you
for the job you guys have done to beautify, especially the front of the zoo.
Yeah, and we've got more coming as we move forward on the parking lot. I know we have some special things coming up throughout the next year. So one of the things I've tried to do is as I prepare for new maybe renovations or updates, If we can get a second use out of something that maybe, as an example, an amelanker, which is native to this area, we're going to use it as a temporary display, but then it'll get moved to a final home out in the front. We've also had some discussions that our hill, as you face the Welcome Center down to the right, is not well organized, and it seems to have been an area where we have an extra tree, we'll just put it in there, and now it's crowded. So we're actually going to start working on a new alpine garden in there as well. And that's our first impression. And our first impression should be clean and overwhelmingly beautiful. And my team is we're working hard on it.
What's it like to maintain such a large facility? Because I know you have a horticulture team, but there is also some extra people sometimes.
So over summer, I have some seasonals, and they're great for blowing down, picking up litter and debris, things that would pull my team away. They're also a great support, so when we have to drop a tree or we have larger plantings, that they jump in and help. There are times where it is completely overwhelming. Every time I walk, I see something different that we need to fix this. How do I change that? How can we update that? I am so bad that even on summer safari, when I'm supposed to be enjoying myself, I'm walking and thinking, oh my gosh, I need to make a note. And then I'm taking pictures and texting them myself so that I remember when I go in, we need to fix this. There's always room for improvement. And unfortunately, with my ADHD, if I see something cool, it snowballs, and I'm thinking, where could we do that? How can we do this? Where can we make an improvement? And how can I do this at a reasonable cost? Because as we move forward, there's a lot of things that get expensive. So trying to reuse plants, propagate plants. We're very excited we're going to get a greenhouse, which will allow us to, instead of buy full-size plants, get some plugs and develop them, which will help in the long run to reduce our plant cost. And the facility I work with up in Michigan is phenomenal. They've donated a lot of stuff to us because we are a public garden as well as a zoo. So when I say, hey, how much of this can you donate? And I get a bill that's maybe a third or a quarter of what I thought it was going to be, it's huge, which is exciting.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break here, and we're going to play a little game.
Oh,
You excited?
I don't know.
You should be excited.
Yeah, you're going to be excited.
You're going to be excited, I promise. So here at Uproar, we like to call it 10 questions. Okay, so you're going to ask us 10 yes or no questions
Okay.
to figure out what animal we're thinking of. But since it's normally 20 questions, I'm going to tell you we're thinking about a mammal. Okay.
And then we aren't animal people, so we are all kind of impromptu fact checkers. So if you ask a question we don't know, we're going to pull out our little fact checking devices and give you the correct answer.
All right, Julie, you ready?
10 questions.
10 questions.
So
Are you
I'm
ready?
asking you 10 questions.
Yes, asking us 10 yes or no questions
For an animal that we have in mind.
in mind.
It's a
Okay.
mammal.
It's a mammal. All right. Is it bigger than a Great Dane?
No.
No.
Does it climb trees?
Hold that thought for a minute. It might be able to, but I'm not 100% sure. Hold on.
It doesn't typically,
Doesn't typically climb trees.
but they can.
Does it
Yeah.
fly?
No.
No, flying mammal. That'd be
Bat.
So it's not a squirrel.
So it's not a squirrel.
Or a bat.
Or a bat?
bat.
Yeah.
Don't shame her for her questions.
No, I think it's a great question.
Well, you got to think outside the box.
You got to think. That's right. Here at Uproar, we like to think outside the box.
Do we use it for educational purposes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Should we give her a clue?
I think we should give her a clue.
Because
Yeah.
it's our game. We
Okay,
get to
well-
do whatever we want. So we have a clue for you.
Okay.
It can destroy all of your hard work in the gardens.
That's actually quite a few of them. So, bigger than a rabbit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on the size
Well,
of the rabbit.
Yes. Typically bigger than a rabbit. Bigger than a cottontail rabbit.
Okay, but smaller than a Great Dane. And it can climb.
Here's another hint. It's in the northern hemisphere.
See, I never did well with this game.
Well, we know it's not a squirrel.
Yeah,
so,
we do know
you
it's not a squirrel, and it's okay.
It's not a Great Dane.
It's not a Great Dane.
Start checking off animals that you know that are disruptive.
It's smaller than a Great Dane and doesn't fly.
And bigger than a
Well,
rabbit.
I know we had the possum, but she's no longer with us. And we use it for educational purposes. And it's not the porcupine that we have, is it?
No.
No.
Okay.
What do we
'Cause I
got, like
think-
5 questions?
Porcupines do climb, so.
They
All
live
the
in
time.
So does
trees.
this one.
Okay.
What?
So does this one can't
It
climb.
can climb.
It can climb, but it doesn't typically.
Yeah.
Honestly, I've never seen one climb. So, I mean, up a tree. I've seen them on like
Yeah,
logs.
I've never seen
and
you
stuff.
climb a tree, but I know you can.
Randy, I
he?
can't.
You climb on the side
I
of the
can't.
tree.
I can't climb a tree. I fall too quickly.
Is it in Legends?
Is not in
It's
Legends.
not in
Legends.
Legends.
All right, and there's nothing up in Africa.
And we do use it for educational purposes, so it makes it an animal ambassador.
Okay, and that's where, see, and I don't know who's all in there. I know we have the swans, and I know we have the birds, and I know we have the porcupine because I got to feed her.
All right.
It's a northern hemisphere animal that can do destruction to plants. Here is maybe a clue. There is it's a popular day focused around this animal.
Oh, come on, Randy.
I got nothing.
We'll keep asking questions.
We only have
It's a
You still have
day
5 questions.
themed about this animal.
well, we had the Red Panda Day.
Yeah, but that's
think
not the
more-
same.
Not a northern. Yeah. it's
Yeah,
Not an Ohio
well,
animal.
Red panda's northern hemisphere.
I corrected
not
myself
Ohio, yeah.
to say Ohio.
And think more national, not National Day, not like a zoo day or anything like that.
Oh, so it's not like this is, well, it could be like this is National Chinchilla Day.
Correct.
Right.
There
But
was a
it's-
movie about this day.
Mm-hmm.
Groundhog?
Hey!
Yeah, we have a groundhog.
Summer the groundhog.
Summer the groundhog.
Yeah, no, I didn't know we had a groundhog. And they do climb because we
Yeah.
have them in our yard. And I actually, especially the juveniles, we have a peach tree. And I watch this thing
Oh.
climb the peach tree
Yeah.
to get peaches.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say I've never
They
seen one climb
Like,
a tree. But
I
Yeah.
can
I mean, I've
envision
seen-
them climbing, but I've never seen one climb.
Summer will
Yeah.
climb, but Summer is a special groundhog.
So where did we get Summer from?
She was rescued from locally.
Okay.
So she was found as an orphan. A dog had her actually, and so the owner of the dog rescued her, took her to Stark Parks, which
Okay,
is local
down the
here.
street, yep.
Yep. And so they rehabilitated her, re-released her, and then a couple days later, started getting phone calls from people about this groundhog asking to be picked up. So it was realized pretty quickly that Summer, the groundhog, had bonded with people. It was not able to be re-released. So they gave us a call, and we were looking for a groundhog to join our Animal Ambassador program, which is
Okay.
where animals go to schools, libraries, etc., to teach kids and adults alike about native animals.
Okay.
excellent.
You
Groundhog.
wanna
I guess I
give-
need to go into education more and see what else we have.
So, when we opened Pride of Africa back in 2019,
Okay.
right before we opened the habitat, some young evergreen trees were planted in the lion habitat. Donovan the lion thought these were great toys, and he thoroughly enjoyed trying to climb them, rubbing up against them, and he knocked down every single one of those trees. Do you have any stories of an animal that is on your last nerve because they keep destroying your plants?
Humans.
Oh, that's a fair.
All right,
that
fair
is a
question.
fair
That's-
answer.
Expecting that
That's
angle.
and I only say that because in other places everybody walked past and admired the beauty or they stopped and they talked. Here I find there's much more picking. So you plant something, it looks great, and then the next day you go past and it's missing the top of the flowers, or you find the remnants in another flower bed because people pick. And I almost think that the kids are a little bit, they like the beauty and they want to take flowers to mom, but mom or dad needs to say, no, we'll stop and buy flowers instead of picking. Because it creates holes and there's a lot that goes into it.
So the moral of the story for our listeners is please don't pick anything at the zoo.
Or throw cigarette butts or trash into stuff.
Well, they
Yes.
shouldn't be smoking in the zoo anyway because we are a non-smoking facility.
Correct. We could use a sign at the front gate that says, please put your butts out now.
We do.
All right, Julie. Well, to wrap this up, is there anything that you would like to add that we never asked you questions about?
I have some goals of putting us on the map for things to be the first of. So I'm hoping we can move forward with that. And I'd love to get us Arboretum status too.
So let's leave it with if you could give our listeners an advice about their garden, what would you say? Anything.
Make sure you're putting the right plant in the right location. As I go through the zoo, I'm finding we have a lot of plants in the wrong location, and then we have a lot of dead, and it's costly. But then it's also a lot of work for somebody to replace or dig up. So make sure you're paying attention to the right plant, the right location, and if you can, plant native.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Julie.
Thank you for having
me. We
me.
really appreciate it. On behalf of all of us at Uproar,
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Uproar is a production of the Akron Zoo, produced by Vince Jeffries, scheduling and recording by Zach Berkey, sound mixing and editing by Caleb Morgan, researchers Zach Berkey, Randy Thomas, Elena Bell, and Sam James. Uproar is a weekly podcast with new episodes every Thursday. For more information on the Akron Zoo, visit akronzoo.org. For more information on Uproar, visit akronzoo.org/uproar.